everybody. For Forestry Commission meeting. And so a number of you, I think most people are familiar with the commission with their community agreements. And we decided at the last meeting that we'd like to highlight one or two of those agreements each meeting. And I'm going to do that today, but it might be a good idea to sort of have a round robin with that and even share that responsibility, that folks might look at them, before the meeting and think about one or two that really resonate with them and maybe even say why. So I'm going to mention a couple of these, and we're totally open to a different process on this, but thought that could be a helpful way to do it, as it's sort of a long discourse to read them each time. And so I'm going to just note a couple to acknowledge our shared goals of doing a good job and making a positive and lasting contribution to the urban forest, the community, and the city. To listen with intent to understand and learn rather than respond. Encourage asking questions respectfully, focusing on issues rather than individuals. And finally, I'll do a third today. Support discourse and be willing to experience and share discomfort and disagreement, and expect and accept non-disclosure. And I'll just take a moment to say that these are particularly meaningful to me because the work that I've been involved in my life, when this really happens, you do the best and most creative work together. So thank you for that. And we'll just move on with the regular part. Any comments about that? We have like another minute or two on community agreements or thoughts. Okay, great. And so we will welcome public comments at this time.
First up is Sean Hennessy. Thanks for being here in person, Sean.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Good morning. I live on Flabell Street in Eastmoreland, and I've spoken with a number of you about my concerns for the trees in my neighborhood. Jen, Rob Irving, who I see is on video, and Casey, who is the city arborist for the project, I believe.
Not me, no.
A different Casey?
Yes, yeah, sorry. My name is Casey Clapp. I'm a volunteer on the commission. You might be referring to Casey Jogurst, potentially, but she no longer works in this city.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, there is a tree inspector on Rob's team whose name is Casey.
Okay,
We
great.
have a wealth of cases.
A wealth of cases.
In any event, I'm here today because I moved to Portland in large part for its urban forest and chose neighborhoods like Ladd's Addition and Eastmoreland because of their mature tree canopies. For more than a decade, 8 maple trees lined my street. They were planted 25 years ago by the neighborhood church. And during planning for the church's new welcome center, project that had already removed a former green space, I was promised by that developer and that pastor that those trees would be preserved. Multiple residents raised similar concerns with the city and were told during the land use review that no mature trees would be removed or disturbed from the site, and there would be no resulting impacts to the streetscape. That turned out not to be true. On September 2nd, neighbors were informed that all 8 trees in the public right-of-way would be removed to accommodate a new sidewalk that was not part of the land use review. Immediately, our neighbors acted in good faith to preserve them. We contacted city councilors, urban forestry, spent hours on the phone with Portland Permitting and Development, met with the church and developers, hired arborists, proposed alternative sidewalk designs, consulted the neighborhood tree committee, and reached out to the media. In the end, these events accomplished nothing. Despite pursuing every possible path for preservation, the trees were removed. These were Norway maples and designated a nuisance species. Even though they were healthy, mature trees that make up more than a third of Eastmoreland's canopy, the city could not require their preservation. This is what my street looks like now. It is unrecognizable. It was ruined, frankly. Street area canopy coverage went from 75% to 0%. There was no public notice and no opportunity for appeal. Despite unanimous opposition of every resident on the street, the wishes of a single developer outweighed the voices of an entire block. Months later, neighbors are still grieving the impacts: destruction of natural beauty, loss of shade and privacy, worries about increased summer heat and higher energy costs. Personally, I am upset on behalf of my children who used to play under the shade of these trees every day and now cannot. I'm angry that despite extraordinary community engagement, urban forestry failed to respond to our concerns and failed to fulfill their most basic purpose. As the commission moves toward phase 3 of the urban forest management plan, I would respectfully ask that what happened on Flavelle Street be treated as a case study to prevent similar outcomes. Specifically, I would ask you to consider: 1, revising the nuisance species designation to protect existing mature Norway maples planted outside of natural areas. 2, holding development permits to the same street tree standards as non-development permits, so that routine sidewalk work is not justification for removal of mature trees. And 3, allowing public appeal of development permits that would remove multiple street trees in the public right-of-way. I find it tragic that my children no longer live on the shaded tree-lined street that I hoped city policy would protect. I urge your action now to ensure that future policies are more aligned with stated forestry goals and will prioritize the preservation of our urban forest for generations to come.
So much for coming. Any comments at this time?
Thanks for your comments, Sean. I appreciate them. I appreciate all the effort and the value that you and your neighbors put into those trees. Urban forestry also values trees very highly. That's why we do the work. Down to Casey, the tree inspector who's involved. Your statement about being disappointed in urban forestry, I just want to say that it is city council who set the codes, not urban forestry. Whether we agree with those codes or not, we are obligated to implement them without being arbitrary or capricious. That is what happened in this case. So because of the experience you and your neighbors had, you might want to consider making comments to the code amendment project that we are starting now. That is a comprehensive project that has been waiting for the Portland Urban Forest Plan to be updated. That's now done. That will inform the code amendments. But we are collecting all kinds of input across the board from folks like you and folks at the other end of the spectrum who find large trees to be problematic.
Thank you for your response.
You're welcome. And I'm pretty sure you would have gotten a link where to submit those specific code comments from Rob through the many email exchanges. But if not, please reach out to trees@ or one of us and we can give that to you. I just don't know it off the top.
Yeah, thank you. Robert shared that link and I intend to do so, but
Great.
I felt this was an appropriate forum to
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and it is. I just wanted to speak on behalf of your disappointment with urban forestry. I think it's not well placed. And please encourage your neighbors, whatever their interest or desire from the tree code is, to also submit comments. We want as much input as possible as we do that process.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate this. I used to be an inspector working on this exact space and this exact situation. So I really feel this, and I brought it up to this. I brought it up to my superiors when I did work at the city. I'm bringing it up again because you just brought it up. The nuisance species list is not functional for what our goals are. It works well in terms of keeping nuisance species from being planted, but it allows for this exact thing to happen. And I've done walks, and I'd be happy to take everybody here on one of these walks, where having a nuisance species tree that is healthy, if it is not causing any other significant issues, that should probably be kept around. If it is in a non-development situation, the city foresters, I should say, I don't know, the development foresters now are able to say, no, you cannot remove that nuisance tree in this non-development situation. If it's a street tree, they can say no. If it's in development, they cannot say no. So the specific nuisance species list causes more trees to be removed when they shouldn't be than almost anything else I have come across as a city inspector. So I think we as the Urban Forestry Commission should really put our finger on that scale to help people in this situation keep their trees around. we shouldn't plant Norway maples, I understand that, but if they are healthy and providing us the canopy coverage and the benefits and services we need, then we should probably keep them around because the positives in this case outweigh the negatives.
Any other final comments on this?
I just want to say thank you because I think you sharing your story, and I know this is something that Casey has brought up in the past multiple times. It helps keep it in our consciousness when when we're looking at the code amendment process, which is where we can really make it, possibly propose some changes. So yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
And city
more
council
comments.
also has public comment opportunities, since they're the ones who set code. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, good. 3 more comments, maybe keep it brief. Sorry, I missed who was first, but so I'll just go in order. Commissioner Van Mark.
Well, yeah, I really want to appreciate your coming to the commission. And I am sorry. I am someone that has a very mature black locust in my yard that I've kept. So I can relate. And I also just, I wish this wasn't how you found advocacy, but I would love to always encourage other ways to have you bring your advocacy forward, in the future to join the commission itself, but also, to join potentially with other groups that would benefit from your advocacy locally, like Trees for Life Oregon. So I just think you're bringing forward important things and hopefully would encourage you to continue to be involved.
Commissioner Sanchez.
Hi, thank you for bringing your concerns to the commission today. I'm sorry that the result was not favorable. I also like to agree with Casey on his comments about nuisance list. Certainly is something that can be reevaluated in a way that is beneficial to the urban forestry department and the urban forestry as a whole. I was also just more so curious, where is this project at in terms of replanting? Is it be a 1-to-1 replacement currently with the loss of the trees, and are the trees going to be installed in larger caliper in a wider strip?
Yeah, so 7 trees have been replanted. They are 2-inch, 2 caliper inch trees. They were replanted last week, and they are cascaras.
The cascaras?
Yes.
All 7?
For those who don't
So
know, those are very small form trees that mature.
Is it a high voltage line or is it a narrow strip?
No, there's no utility line on that side of the street. It's simply a narrow strip.
Okay. I'm sorry to hear that. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner McMillan.
Yes. First of all, I absolutely acknowledge your grief. This is a question for the larger commission and leadership. Is this an opportunity for us to advise city council and write a letter and give them alternatives to sidewalk? I mean, whatever expertise. I think it's valuable to offer a very strongly worded statement.
That is certainly within the commission's purview.
Yeah, so my recommendation would be, why don't we take that up as an agenda item, maybe our next meeting, to say, is there anything that's reasonable to do in the interim as we work on code amendments? I'm not sure, off the top of my head, I'm thinking it's gonna be tough, but it's worth talking about. So, because I think that could be a big discussion.
And
Is
I
that-
wonder
is that
about
fair?
the timing, like, is there a
Yes.
really a good time, a better time, or not as good of a time to put that out? Like, in terms of
Yes.
when the
Yes,
code amendment process is happening, do we wait more closer to that time? Or,
Right.
which I know is
Right.
coming, but.
Based on my experience working in city government and with council, I feel like council is very attentive to situations and desires from the community that come to them on a regular basis. And saving things up is maybe not the best way to do that.
Okay.
If one wants them to really be understanding the concerns.
Right.
We, of course, will be bringing an array of concerns and therefore proposals for their consideration to address those concerns as part of the Title XI amendment project.
Right, sounds like more timely could be useful. Great, thanks. Right, well, thank you so much for coming and we'll go ahead with the city forester's report.
Oh, we have one more.
My name is Noelle Studer-Spivak. It's an honor to be with you here today. I'm representing 350 PDX in the Shade Equity Coalition. And just on the last testimony, there are some other issues too regarding width of sidewalks and new development. They're wider than what's required by ADA. There are measures that other cities employ to protect existing trees that we're not utilizing here in Portland. It's my hope that with urban forestry and PBOT and other agencies all under public works that we can start to work through some of these things that are getting in the way of mature tree preservation. Because as we all know, a mature tree is offering so much more than those tiny trees that they put in.
And have you submitted that in writing to us in any way? Because I would just recommend that you do that.
Sure.
So in case
Yeah,
we
we'll
sort of
write it up.
take an action prior to code,
That would be
we'll consider including that. Thank you.
Yeah. Reason why I'm here today is to just let you all know that I'm shepherding a grant from the Oregon Department of Forestry to really look at community engagement in low canopy areas. And I'm really excited that we get to work with Brittany Wade as a partner and getting input and engagement out to communities in East Portland in particular. And we're working on doing some workforce management opportunities, getting all the summer jobs, seasonal jobs out to high school students and younger folks, job training, green jobs. It has not been easy to get information. And so if you have information about summer work opportunities, please send them to me. And we are putting together a packet by the end of January, and we'll start doing presentations out to the high schools and to the community colleges. So that's one thing. Second thing is that we've been doing the Shade Equity campaign since the heat dome. We're in year 4 now. We've accomplished a lot collaborating with community members and urban forestry staff and city council. And we're in a listening phase right now to figure out what the next few years hold. How do we establish a permanent funding mechanism for street tree maintenance and tree related sidewalk damage repairs? So we're all ears, we're interested. If you'd like to speak with us, you can reach out to me at noel@350pdx.org.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
We should
Thanks for your
connect
service.
around the high school
Okay,
stuff. I
Okay.
might have some.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna move on. Just report.
Thank you. A robust report today. There's lots going on. I'm going to start with noting, thank you, Noelle, for coming and making your comments and for all the work that you and yours are doing.
Thank you.
And for surviving.
Sidewalks, I've been in this role almost 14 years. And working with other bureaus in right of way is a big part of the work and the need. And I will just mention that the Bureau of Transportation also has community advisory groups. And I think we're all on the same page. So maybe that is something to consider as well. Like, I don't know how many folks are coming to those groups, and staff do all the time, as many can attest. It's different and helpful when comments and perspectives come from different folks, not just city staff responsible for it. There's one. Second, speaking of nuisance species, I know Commissioner Clapp has been diligent about your interest in the nuisance species list and how it's used. So I wanted to give an update on that. That is one of the action items that's in the new unanimously approved by council Portland Urban Forest Plan for us to get into. Won't be getting into it in the immediate term just because of other priorities and staffing. And I wanted to share too that there's like 2 aspects of it. There's what it's used for, as well as how and how it is created and by whom. what it's used for is a lot about code, and that's what I think we were all just hearing and thinking about. It is created by the Bureau of Environmental Services. This is just me sharing information, so you know that. And Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, because of the city's planners, and it covers all kinds of plants, right? So it's shrubs and forbs and ground covers as well as trees all lumped together. And that process, it hasn't been updated in a while, and we haven't heard about it in a while, but the process in the past has not always included urban forestry at key times, nor has urban forestry's input always been a priority, and we're only really have only really commented about trees. So that is my finally responding to your interest in that item and letting you know ultimately how it happens, at least presently, and that it's on the list, but it won't be in the near future. It has a time frame associated with it in the action list.
Like a 5-year rotation kind of thing?
I don't think it's that. I think it's that at present is the role of DES and EPS to determine how and when it gets updated. It is an item in the urban forest plan for that need to get visited with urban forestry involved in it.
Yes, gotcha. Yeah, but it definitely requires code change because it is written in the code. It's a nuisance species, this, and this. So it would go above everybody. So we don't necessarily need to change the list, we just need to change how the list is used.
Understood.
Is it Title 11? Which title?
It's Title 11, yeah. Title 11 in development, I believe.
Okay.
It may also though, I'm sure, also in Title 33. Your equipment project is looking at both, even though Title 33 is changes are led by others. We all know, I think that Title 33 requirements also impact the urban forest, so that's part of what we're looking at. And we've just started scoping, like I have a meeting tomorrow about the proposed scope. I don't even know that yet, so early days. I'm gonna move on for the sake of time. I think we all know we had our first significant weather event of the season. As of about half an hour ago, we've urban forestry's responded to 89 service requests since midnight on the 17th. Most of those, the vast majority, are already resolved. There were something like 15 road closures temporarily. Most of those involved power lines, and so we had to wait until utility companies could make it safe for us and everyone else to deal with them. Reminder that urban forestry is the city's 24/7 tree emergency response service, and that is general fund, funded by general fund and levy. That's our arborists. We have 29 arborists at various times doing that service. Thank you to them. They've done an incredible job. Calls have slowed, so for the moment, there's a little bit of catching up and recovery, but more rain is expected. Probably have fun. Yeah. And a reminder, right, this is a great opportunity for commission members as well as everyone to think about the need to engage experienced, qualified, certified arborists to look at trees year-round and help with their care. We have a whole lot of trees in Portland. Most of them are fine through these events. That's how they get big, is they've been through many of them. Fig morphogenesis, figmomorphogenesis. So that is a Commissioner Clapp imitation right there. And electrical hazards are very dangerous, and if those can be part of a tree failure or a branch failure, if there may be power lines, the utility company needs to be there first and we need to stay away. Moving on to another item. Given y'all's requests, Priscilla is including in the commission agenda email information about urban forestry events that you might want to participate in or at least know about. They are also always on our events webpage, and we'll put a link in the chat sometime during the meeting for your reference. You are always invited and welcome to participate, please. I respect your time as volunteers. I don't want to put that upon you, but folks have been interested, so do come. The events often involve a sign up, so that helps us maintain program and a good balance between number of staff and participants. So please sign up. And if you want to lead an event or help present it, emailing Priscilla or me is a good place to start. We're happy to hear about that too. I wanted to shift to the commission recruitment for the vacant seats and upcoming vacancies. We have had over 35 folks apply, which is unprecedented and wonderful. And thanks to Brian Lando and Priscilla Salino's efforts on that end, they've really been doing the recruitment. We are hoping to have appointments at council in March, and potentially those new commissioners approved by council, having had onboard training and seated on the commission for the first time at the March meeting. Really depends on the council timeline. Fingers are crossed. I'm gonna skip that one for the sake of time because there's only 4 more minutes. There was a comment at public comment at last meeting that I wanted to do some follow-up on. We looked into that, I looked into that case and others that was brought at the November meeting. I wanted to let you all know that Urban Forestry and Portland Permitting and Development, Tree Permitting, Rob Irving's team, responded each time to the requests. The urgent needs, like emergency requests, were addressed immediately. And the adjacent property owner involved with the trees were contacted and notified about the need for additional non-urgent tree care. That didn't get addressed and therefore became a compliance situation because of potential public safety hazards. I wanted to remind you all that the city's communication is with the adjacent property owner in those situations. And certainly, as we heard this morning, other folks in the neighborhood and community members may have interest. It's not possible for us, or maybe even appropriate, to communicate about a street tree adjacent to somebody's property with everyone. And sometimes everyone doesn't have the same information or accurate information. We're gonna probably follow up with the complainant about clarifying those things and what the code requires versus what staff
Can I get a clarification, Jen? So the tree that failed, that caused the damage that the complainant called or talked about last month was not the adjacent property owner?
My understanding, not being here and also not having had the opportunity to review the recording, was the person who made the comment was not the adjacent property owner.
Okay.
Yeah. So kind of, well, I'll just proceed. Next, I had committed in previous meetings to give updates on PISA funded programs. I'm gonna make those as quick as I can. I had also been asked to remind folks what PISA funding is from. PSEF is funded through a 1% surcharge on Portland sales of large retailers with $1 billion in national revenue or more and $500,000 or more in local revenue. And how that is used, those funds are the use of those funds is set by council in the climate investment plan. And there are a handful of strategic programs, as they're called in the climate investment plan, that are funding for urban forestry to do certain things that are community and climate action based, as you know. Those funds now comprise PSEF funds, about 68% of urban forestry's annual budget. They're the predominant part of our budget at this point. And those funds are to implement the specific CIP programs, not for other tree related services or things that urban forestry does. So it is a very important part of what our group is able to do. Some of those funds are dedicated to expanding canopy and involving community in that. That's called the Equitable Tree Canopy Program. That is on track and actually ahead of some benchmarks. We are planning in the coming month or two to have a full planting update for you all. So I'll move on to other ones. There's another strategic program, number 34, tree planting, tree protection care. In that is funding to begin development and pilot Portland's first ever street tree maintenance program. That is also on track. Matter of fact, we started this month. We're doing a small dead street tree removal project. It'll be serving as a pilot as well. According to our inventory, street tree inventory, we're contacting adjacent property owners to let them know we'll be there to remove those trees. We're working with our planting program to get them planted back in the future as well. This is, of course, no permits are required for the property owner to handle. They don't have to pay for anything. This is a huge advancement in the city's policies. It is not a sign up. It is us reaching out, and we are also giving folks the option of opting out if they don't want our contractors to come and do that work. It is a contractor-based program. So that's doing well. Future steps, we need to do more hiring. This is currently being done with mostly existing staff, but clearly to stand up a big new program, there needs to be people. And we are developing a large pilot that samples different types of street design across the city to really learn how to do it before, and then we will be coming to piece up and saying, here's what it would take to fund the full program. At a time, I think the rest can wait. Do we have any? We don't have any agenda flexible.
Well,
That's okay.
We could
They
take a
can
few
wait.
minutes from the other items is my guess, but
I think we're gonna need all the time for Heritage Tree
Okay.
and other things, so next month, hopefully you'll get to meet Edith Quinta. We will tell you who she is and what she does. Thanks for your attention.
a few minutes for comments or questions. I had actually one quick thought or comment. That'd be interesting, I think, to sort of hear about your vision for the street tree maintenance in the sense of, you know, how is the current pilot going to feed into decision making on what the process should be, and how would you see a scale up? Should it be funded? You know, it's not urgent, but I think it's the kind of thing that probably this group could help think about a little bit.
Yes, we can. That is why we're doing a pilot.
Yeah.
It has some really
Great.
robust program evaluation tools built into it. But yeah, we can do more of that
Nice.
in the future. And will always appreciate your input and advice.
And anything else, folks? Great, let's move on then to reconciling heritage tree recorded consent and delisting requests.
Thanks for being here, Sam, and preparing all this.
Thank you, everybody. Hi, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I am Samantha Wolf, Heritage Tree Program Manager. Thanks for having me today. For those who haven't met me yet, I'm the Botanic Specialist within Urban Forestry's Science and Policy Work Group. And I, among other special tasks and duties, I manage the Heritage Tree Program. So I wanted to address an issue within the program and our plan to address it. Part of the plan is supported by me, but the second part involves the UFC. So the issue is that most private heritage trees located on private property do not have a county recording document that was signed by the original property owner at the time of designation. So designating a heritage tree on private property has always required property owners to sign a consent form. Since 1993, we've been having those forms signed and saved in the city's files. So we have files for all those trees. But those forms were not recorded with Multnomah County. It wasn't a requirement at the time or general practice. Since 2005, consent forms for onboarding new trees on private property have been notarized and recorded with the county. But all private trees designated before then were not reconciled with this new practice. So to do so requires new forms, new signatures, notarization, and the county won't accept old consent forms. The reason to have county recording of these documents is to ensure that heritage trees are identified during property transfers. Generally, research on property explores county records and a few city resources such as permits or zoning. If there is no record at the county identifying a heritage tree on a property and its associated protections, it's more likely that that heritage tree could be missed or the associated protections are not recognized and surprise property owners. So right now, only 30% of consent forms are in county records, and that leaves about 105 trees that don't show up there. However, the city attorney has confirmed that these trees are still legal heritage trees. So why resolve this issue? Conflicts have come up in the recent past where owners didn't realize they had a heritage tree or they had such protections limiting what they could do to those trees. Recent cases include an elm tree in 2023 and the grand fir in 2016, where removal requests or delisting requests came in. Both property owners claimed they wouldn't have purchased the property had they known in advance that these trees existed and had those limitations, and they felt it was like an unfair burden to them. So it resulted in a high-profile dispute, and both trees were ultimately removed. These disputes were damaging to the integrity of the program, and had fusion with City Council, UFC, and the wider community. So we want to avoid those conflicts in the future, and ensure new property owners can identify their heritage tree no matter when it was designated, and no surprises. That's the goal. And also we have staff time to apply to this effort. So we have already started on this effort. We provided in 2024, we started providing an annual awareness letter to all private property owners, heritage trees, regardless of when they purchased the property. All properties are now with a heritage tree are identified in portlandmaps.com. So you can visit that website, click on a link, and it will highlight if that property has a heritage tree. You can learn more about that tree and its regulations there. We also have added a new website to the heritage tree website for property owners, giving them additional information about how trees are designated and how to find more information about permits and care. All right. So, what are we going to do next? We have this gap to address. Those trees, those 105 trees that have consent forms with the city, but not at the county. We'll be conducting and by we, I mean me, I'll be conducting a 6-month outreach campaign to encourage those 92 property owners associated with those trees to sign and notarize an acknowledgement form. It's not a consent form. This is acknowledging the tree is there and it has these protections. These forms will publicly document the owner's acknowledgements and be reported to the county. Each property owner that participates will get a custom form. They'll sign and notarize it, send it back to me, and I'll record it. I will probably have to reach out multiple times to some of those property owners. I will email them, call them, go knock on their door if I need to. Once we raise attention and give opportunity to affirm these heritage trees, some may want to participate and sign a form. That would be great. Some may not respond at all, and some may not want to participate and even remove their tree from the program. So the lack of county reporting could be one reason why a property owner would not wish to participate. We would probably receive a few delisting requests. And that's where the UFC comes in. The UFC is responsible for hearing those requests, and they decide whether or not to support delisting. However, the UFC does not have a standardized and transparent criteria for evaluating those delisting requests in general. And this can be a source of confusion and inconsistency for the UFC, the program, and those property owners. So the essential question is, should the absence of county recordings that document consent be a valid reason for the UFC to approve delisting requests? And if so, what under circumstances? So here's some options, 3 options. We're seeking UFC guidance to recommend an approach. So the first option is called the expedited delisting option. Here, the UFC would allow delisting based on the absence of county recordings as one consideration. But they would also include other considerations within that, other factors, and consider each case individually. This would require the property owners to submit their delisting requests. Urban Forestry would collect them together in batches for UFC to consider and reduce overall workload for y'all. No action would occur for trees with unresponsive property owners. The benefit of this is that it provides a clear pathway, reduces conflicts overall, especially for those property owners that wish to exit the program. The drawback is that we might see a loss or exit of some trees and requires UFC time to hear those. That's option A. Option B is no expedited delisting, where the UFC says the absence of county recording of consent alone is not a valid reason. And the UFC develops standard criteria that reflects this. So this would require property owners to submit their delisting requests, and UFC would support reasons for delisting such as tree health, safety, etc., but reject reasons based on county reporting. And then again, no action for non-responsive property owners. This benefit of this option is that we would retain the most number of heritage trees in the program, but it would create a lot of conflict potentially, or continued conflict for those that wish to exit the program particularly. It does little to reduce those conflicts that could become a higher profile conflict in future. The last option is the expedited delisting and automatic delisting. This approach would allow delisting based on the absence of county recording and require that all private heritage trees have county recordings by the end of 2026. And that's a tentative date to maintain their designation. This would support property owners that wish to delist their trees based on this reason alone, and it would proactively delist those trees with non-responsive property owners. The benefit would be that we would eliminate that gap. No more trees are, all trees would be recorded at the county. And then we would have very few heritage UFC meetings to respond to that. The drawback is that we would probably lose a lot of heritage trees that way. And we would probably have more conflict based on that action. So all of these options, however, would require that the UFC develops a standardized set of criteria for evaluating delisting requests, whichever one you choose.
Can I ask a question? Oh, is this the time to do that?
One moment, let me finish up, let me go back. If no options are selected, let's just say we don't pick any of them. We're left with our current situation. Where delisting requests come in, each are heard individually by the UFC. Past methods for evaluating those criteria have been a source of conflict, so we have no consistency. how the UFC decides those cases may be inconsistent in the future. And then we could have more high profile conflict. Yes, now.
That was basically what you provided 3 options with kind of the null option as well. So, but those aren't, we can choose anything we want, right?
This is a request for your input.
Okay, great.
And I should add to this, right? So some of you have been here when we've had these difficult situations. You may recall them perhaps vividly. And it was a request of the commission that we staff work to come up with a better way to do these before another one of those situations arises. And that is what Sam has led work on, and many of us have been working on this for months.
Thank you, that's helpful. Also, because a lot of our commissioners here weren't there when this happened, so yeah, it's helpful to hear the backstory.
I should have said that first, but at least you got it.
There was another question. Do you want to finish the presentation to have questions, or do you want to do it along the way?
Well, let me just wrap this up and then that'll be
Okay.
appropriate. So the next step is which options are recommended? What other suggestions do you have? You don't have to stick within the framework provided. If you are creative and if you have thoughts that might include one option or another or something completely new, that would be welcome. And then how will the UFC establish that delisting criteria? Whichever one we go with, that is absolutely helpful for going forward. I also provided a timeline of events for when the outreach campaign will start. So next month is when we will begin. And then the UFC hopefully would start drafting their criteria during that same time, so that 6-month window. And then after that 6 months is when and if I have a pile of delisting requests to present. So we would be prepared by then. And now I can answer questions.
Commissioner McMillan.
Yes, is this an appropriate time for me to suggest some, I guess, amendments or revisions to one of these?
Go ahead.
Just ideas? Okay. So I like option B the most, but I would say that our default should be saving all trees just because they are, the lawyer said they are, they have a legal protection. We do not offer delisting as part of that initial conversation unless they ask, how do we exit this program? Then we as a commission have established a very clear route. We're very transparent with anyone that requests it. This is how you do it. We can even, help them through the process to prepare them. That's the thing that we will define in the very near future. But that the actual delisting, we could do under kind of a subgroup, a smaller group of us to review every single one, because I believe that is our duty as commissioners, and come up with some recommendations, which we then present to the larger commission to vote on. I believe in kind of lowering the numbers of requests, but if they want to pursue this, we need that kind of regular defined process, and are very transparent upfront about how to do that, possibly with instructions. But that would eliminate a lot of the request. I mean, not a lot of the requests, but just kind of cut down on it. But we are also involved in every single one of those.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, commissioners, questions?
Question? Sam, has anyone responded to the letters that you've already sent out or the emails? Because you said you send out, like, you're starting an annual thing. Has anyone
I've been sending
responded?
them out. I haven't gotten any responses or concerns.
Okay.
Just want to tie off of what you're, because I think I understand what you're getting at. So, as a public health person, what I would do is actually send out like, or do this process to a random 15 or 10 or 15% and see what you get, whatever your process is. Because, you could spend a huge amount of time on theorizing what you're gonna do, and you have like one case of someone who says no, right? So it's like how it's 90 something property owners and
92
100 something
property owners.
trees, right? So see, what this really is, and have that as part of, what the investment should be to solve it.
Okay.
Anyway, just throwing that out there. And I think that was kind of maybe what you were getting at, that like, I have no idea, but on the surface, being hopeful about trees, I would say most people probably
Yeah.
want to keep them, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I did. I was
But-
curious what the,
Yeah,
just if anyone has responded to say
right,
anything,
right, exactly.
if they're beginning now.
Yeah, you could spend a lot of time on theory, so.
What would,
Commissioner?
My concern is the litigious nature of our society today. And the desire to have these recorded has existence since the beginning of the program. But the ability to do that has only been fairly recent. I would encourage, yes, Sam reaches out and we see how many private property owners approve, they want them. Then we know how many potential trees are at risk. And I'm inclined to, if the property owner says, I don't want my tree to be listed as a heritage, I don't want it in the deed, or I don't approve that, I won't sign that, I think we need to let them go. Yes, that's wonderful trees. Yes, that's a lot of work that's been done by urban forestry staff and incredible volunteers over many years. But frankly, I don't think UFC should ever have to go through that discussion we had over the elm tree on Mississippi. It could have been avoided, but it wasn't avoided. And I don't care if the city attorney says, yes, we have the paperwork, these are all right. We are not going to win in those discussions. Being on the side that did not win, I can speak soundly to that, took a hell of a beating. And we don't need that kind of PR for UFC and for UF. Yes, we're going to lose some great trees. I don't know how many. We've got over 300. If we lost, say, 60 of them, hey, that's 60 trees we lost, but it ain't worth the price, in my opinion.
I agree with you, Bruce. That's something it makes me think about is the case by case basis. It's not just time for us, it's a lot of time on the property owner. And time is not something that is equitably available to all people. And I think about what the same case in 2023, the folks had to come to several meetings with us. It was a lot of time and a lot of frustration on their behalf. But they did apparently have that time, but not everybody does. And I don't think a policy that the people with the most time and access get to win what they want is a good one. That's just my opinion. So I'm with you because I think on a case by case basis, that's kind of what it inadvertently might be, is the folks who have the time, who can come here in the middle of the workday to talk to us, are the ones who get their way. And the people who don't have that time won't be able to do the thing that they would really like or would be best for them. So I would also be more in favor of option A.
Sam, could we go back to the options? Thanks. We also closed the webinar chat. Nice, thank you.
I guess one last thought on the PR piece. I also think even if it's just one case, we know the backlash can be great, and I don't know, it could cause more harm than good in the long run for the trees in the program, I think. If we're about to go into a code revision process and there's some really bad thoughts around this program, it might actually lead to a worse outcome in the end, potentially. I mean, we can't predict the future.
Commissioner McMillan.
Yes, apologies for taking up time, but could we be more proactive in supporting these homeowners? I absolutely agree with the last comment that it is in favor of those with time and even money. And I would say that if being proactive instead of waiting for them to delist or asking to delist, that we develop partnerships with them and offer them consultations or offer them free inspections, but also being very proactive about this is what your tree needs and this is what we can do. And this is what kind of maintenance is coming up, or expand the street tree maintenance to include heritage trees, something like that, so that they don't feel like they were blindsided with this statement, this request to sign something off, and that we are a partner in helping them care for this tree rather than the burden's on you. You have to come do this extensive process, or even if it's expedited, I just don't want to see that loss of those trees. And I think that would cut down on the bad PR or this exploding into something that really divides us, both as a community and a commission. I just want to throw that out there.
City first.
Thank you so much for the comment, Commissioner McMillan, and trying to find ways to help people want to have heritage trees, make it easier for them. I wanted to give some information. Street trees are that are heritage trees are already the responsibility of urban forestry to maintain. So this is just private property trees. And we have agreed with your perspective, your prescience, and have made many steps along those lines to help people know they have a heritage tree in advance, give them support, help them get assistance with tree care, up to being able to pay for the tree care, which we don't have funds or authority to do. There is the private property tree care program that we are building with PSEP money. However, that is specifically focused on low-income property owners, and that is infrequently a heritage tree property. I want to point that out. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Sam, about the extensive work you've done to try to support heritage tree property owners. May or may not be relevant.
It's been consistent in the past. I've been in this role for 2 years, and I have not had the case where urban forestry, where additional support in terms of like maintenance and direct care to the trees was provided by urban forestry when it was classified as a private heritage tree. There have been cases in the past where some arborists provided pro bono services, but it hasn't been consistent or a regular effort supported by urban forestry.
Could these resources be part of the outreach, just so it's very clear?
For actual tree maintenance, we do not have resources for private property heritage trees.
No, not maintenance, just
Okay.
Here's the information, this is the support, this is the criteria of what we can and can't do. This is where you can receive more support. Being as proactive as we can in reaching out and getting these signatures.
Yes. Thank you.
Just a clarification on what's been said. I know you're waiting, Commissioner Vandermark, but just give me 1 second. So I know there was an issue with supporting things on private property, so how is it that we can do it for low income, but not for heritage trees? I mean, you're working on a support for that,
For private property tree care.
right?
Yeah, I didn't have time for this in my report today, but this is another one of the PSEF
Right.
Strategic programs that is in the climate investment plan.
Okay.
We have $5 million over 5 years
Okay.
to develop the city's first ever private property tree care support program for low income property owners. Low income is being determined according to the other city programs that do that. Water Bureau help with a water bill, for example.
So maybe possible for future, but not now.
Right, because the
That we have
funding
that.
source requires it to be low income.
Right.
And,
Right.
we don't have many, if any,
Yeah.
heritage trees on with low income property.
Okay. Yeah, I'm interested, I mean, it's my personal opinion that if the city wants legacy heritage trees, they should be maintaining them. They're so expensive and it's intergenerational, do you know what I mean? So it kind of conceptually, to me, makes the most sense. But, and that's gonna be going forward, that's gonna be the largest rub. I mean, if we had that elm tree on the deed, I think we still would have had the same problems. I mean, there would have been, that wouldn't have been an argument they could have used, and maybe the voting in UFC might have been a little different, but it still would have been the same issue. Anyway, Commissioner Vandermark.
Yeah, and I have various thoughts. One of them is, and I don't know, Sam, what the plan is after this, but I think because of the potential impact just on, very large, significant trees in our community, I would hope that we would have a little bit more time to like circle back on this rather than make a specific recommendation today. But because of that, I'm also curious what output or what other efforts have been made to seek input from others. Like, I'm curious what the Heritage Committee members, the folks that have really advocated on behalf of our heritage trees, like what input they might have on this, or if there's just other community input, because I think this is an issue that could have far-reaching impacts. So I'm curious what we're doing to kind of get some more, and more input, and I wouldn't want to move quicker than needed to make this decision, particularly if we might see a significant number of delistings as a result of what we decide.
Any other comments or questions?
Just building off what you said about if we have an interest as a city in these trees, the city should be caring for them. Something it made me think about is why there's so few heritage trees in low canopy, lower income neighborhoods. And I mean, there's obviously a lot of reasons, right? Like the size of the lot, and larger lots are often more expensive. But also, who would want to sign on for this level of responsibility? Someone who felt pretty confident economically they could do it, right? So it does make me think about if there was a possibility in the future to assume the care of the trees, I do wonder about how would that change who says yes to the program and who wants to have a heritage tree on their property, and how that might mean we get more heritage trees. And because even in East Portland, we do have some very large Douglas firs, especially, right? Like that people might then choose, oh, if I can get this tree cared for, that might make them a lot more interested in the program. So that is a thought. I also wonder about specific outreach to encourage that to happen so that we can get a better distribution of these heritage trees across our city. Because when you look at the map, it's pretty clear that we don't have that right now.
Brian, Lando.
Yeah, hey everyone. Really appreciate all the comments and discussion so far. I just wanted to, I joined a little bit late, so this might have been said already, but just wanted to note that if a heritage tree is delisted, it's no longer a heritage tree, it would still need to meet Title 11 review requirements in order for it to be removed. So, there's still healthy trees can still be removed if they meet certain requirements under Title 11. But just want to note that the delisting does not predetermine that the tree would then be removed afterwards. So that's just a consideration for you all as well.
Recommendations on next steps?
I have one.
Oh, sure.
Yes, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Ramsey. I work with Sam on the Heritage Tree Program. The one comment about the Mississippi elm, it would have gone the same way either way. I agree with that, but the thing that I think we're trying to resolve here is for the folks that didn't sign that consent form, that didn't say, yep, I'm signing up for this program, fully acknowledging that and then owning that tree and being responsible for it. That's the group of people that this is really gonna address, I think. And what am I trying to say? I think that the UFC should think about the next person who comes in with that situation and how you want to deal with that. And this the plans that Sam is showing you are trying to really address that part of the Mississippi elm situation.
Makes sense, yeah.
I think personally, I don't think we should delist anything out of hand. I think we should, no matter what, talk to the property owner. But I personally don't want to lose any of the trees. I don't want to go through what happened with the Mississippi elm again. That was really hard. And I personally, as a city regulator, disagree with how that happened. If my point is still relevant, I think that if you bought the property and it had a heritage tree on it, that's a heritage tree. And I understand if you didn't know, you didn't do the due diligence, I get that, but that doesn't change the fact. Now I also understand that we don't want a black eye on this committee, we don't want a black eye on the program itself. So I'm really, I don't know, I'm hard pressed to want to get rid of anything out of hand, but I would rather talk to them and try to convince them, anyone who says, I don't want to be in this program, to say, well, you're already technically in it. Yeah, what's your choice? And try to figure that out. I just don't know that I want to make it so easy for people to just delist their trees. I think that would hurt us as an urban forest, because these trees, they are on a private property, but they are a larger resource for the city, for the community. So I don't think that there is really, I think we need to change our whole kind of mentality of private property equals private property rights, because we're not dealing with something that's just a private property. It's not a stick of corn where we can say, well, that is on your property. It doesn't affect anybody else. It is in particular a giant tree that affects an entire community. Most of the time you can see it from blocks away. So I don't think that we as a representative of the community should just out of hand go and say, private property owner, whatever your rights that you think you have, we're agreeing with that, because they are still a part of this program. So I think we should at least have some amount of backbone to say, you're already a part of this program. I know you may not want to, but that is the way it is. Now let's work and see how we can figure out what realm we can walk down. Because this is a community asset. It's not just a single person's tree.
So what I heard is that we're very supportive of this process of trying to address this. And there's some mixed feelings about exactly which plan to do. I heard from me and maybe others that there's mixed feelings too about that it's not going to necessarily solve the problem of needing standards of when a tree is delisted and when a tree, should be removed and this kind of thing. I mean, that's something we kind of, especially the undue burden part of the thing, that's written, where we don't have a good understanding of what's an undue burden and to who. And so therefore, how can we act like judges when people kind of come So, and I did hear from Commissioner Vandermark that we shouldn't do a snap decision, and I'm kind of hearing from everyone they're mixed, so what if we did, would you have the staff to do like a random 10 to 15% sample in January and come back with the results?
I think we can take that under advisement and get back to y'all.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, yeah.
But I appreciate that.
Yeah. Did you have a question or comment?
Just as working on the Heritage Tree program.
Yeah.
I think as a city staff, we're opening that can means that we need to have answers for people who have it, whether it's we go to 10 or go to 100, we need to have that answer either way. And so I think
Right
that
then.
only going to a sample means we're then offering something to some people and not others, and that'd be a real concern for me.
Yeah.
So I
No,
do
good
wanna
point. Yes. Yeah.
make
yeah.
sure we have our ducks in a row
Right,
for
right.
any situation.
Yeah.
Although sampling and piloting is something we're very attached to. So I had my hand up just to provide information to count Commissioner Plack's comment, like recruiting in other parts of the city. There has been some concerted effort around that by previous Heritage Tree Committee members, Greg Everhart in particular, when she was the chair of that group. And the outcomes were not remarkably different.
Yeah.
So I think there's other factors at play than
That doesn't surprise me
awareness.
one bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the outreach paired with support. Yeah. And even then, I think there may be a lack of trust from some people in East County feeling like, well, partnering with the city, like I don't always see the city coming to my neighborhood to do things. So there's probably more than just that, but I do think that the supporting with assistance on maintenance could make a difference for some.
Yeah, and that would take dedicated new funding from council, right, just to be clear with you all. Unless we're gonna stop doing something else we're doing. And what I didn't get to say is there will be budget cuts this year. Next month, we will spend time at this meeting on that and they will be significant.
Commissioner Nelson.
I wanted to thank Casey for his comments. You may disagree on some things. In my mind, what I'd like, okay, Sam contacts these 92 or tries to. Some of them go for it. The ones that there's no communication back or they're opposed, I agree with Casey, these are a community asset. And I believe it's appropriate to notify the community around that tree that there's an issue with this tree. Perhaps neighbors can convince their fellow neighbors, maybe you would change your mind. I mean, they are an asset. In theory, you can see them from the street, so everybody enjoys them. But it is the neighbors that, if you happen to own this house and you're there for 8 years and you get the tree removed in the time you're there, what does that do for the next property owner who would have loved to have that tree? So I know there are limitations on what urban forestry staff would do in terms of reaching out, but I think the neighborhood association and close proximity neighbors are appropriate to notify. If that can't be done by urban forestry, perhaps we can find nonprofit groups or interested tree lovers who could do that in hopes that that would shake loose a few more trees. Because it is a community benefit. I completely agree with that. And I'd hate to see the trees disappear because one particular private property at one particular point in time decided, I don't care for that tree as a heritage tree. Who knows what they do later. But the legal threat is just, I'm sorry, it's here and it's going to continue to be here. But I would like, it's very frustrating when you contact all these people and you don't hear a bloody thing from them. I think it has to be knocking on doors, but it's how much of that do you do before you say, So.
I just have one thought. I do think that starting with the UFC standards, if we were to choose one of these, if I was to choose one, I would choose B. I would definitely try to come up with UFC standards, because if we chose B, for example, then delist for other reasons. We can be very clear about what reasons there are. So here is your pathway if you really think your tree should be delisted, you really want it to be delisted. But as a community asset, it will be, I don't know, a staircase you have to climb to get there. Are we gonna be the world's most like atrocious group and make that as hard as possible? Ideally not. I think that would be a bad thing. But if we do come up with some standards, I don't know, we'll have time to do that in the next less than 1 minute. But I think that would be really important so that we as a group can say, okay, here's what we are looking at. But I think it's also important that we don't make that set in stone in the way that it is with the city regulations, for example, where if you reach this exact thing that is perfectly defined, then you get to go forward. Because then there's no reason to have us. We say the rules, someone checks the boxes, and if all the boxes are checked, you're done. So if we say things that we can actually debate about, say here is the positive and here's the negative, then I think that gives us a tool that we can review, but it doesn't necessarily make it just check these boxes and it's gone. I think that's an important thing that we should move for the heritage trees in particular.
Okay, well, you gotta read from one member on the specific vote. Is it too late to get a read from others in January or February? Or do you want us to go around the room now? We're kind of out of time, but what's most helpful to you?
And this is a time frame question for
Yeah.
plans. Like,
Yeah.
I think we had said that further discussion by the commission is fine. We don't have to.
I can come back next.
January may be tight with other agenda items, some of which are timely, like budget.
Sure, well, let me know. I can
Or,
come back.
yeah, would February work? And then you might have a little more data. I'm just trying to even, we could have the same discussion
How
again,
late
which
is
maybe isn't helpful.
Well,
So it's
I
like,
think
are you
I-
gonna bring more information or?
Yeah, I would like
thoughts?
clarity on, you don't want us to send letters to try to start the conversation with these property owners before you make a decision, is that what you're saying?
Oh,
Or
I would.
are you okay with us starting this outreach process?
I mean, I
Knowing that
do
we're gonna-
think it would be helpful, because then we'll have a little more data to go on, of
Yeah.
like,
Kind of what you're
how much of
suggesting.
a
Yeah.
problem is it? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't think reaching out now or later would change anything, because we're gonna reach out no matter what. So I think that reaching out now and just, I don't know, taking the pulse, the
Outreach
temperature.
takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't want you to wait till February to start doing that, because I feel like
Yeah.
that'll just really
Mhm.
push the timeline.
Yeah, it could also make this a non-issue if all
Yeah.
92 are just like,
Yeah.
wow, let's do it, this is great, love my tree now. Then
I
this wouldn't be a thing.
Yeah, my vote might be different with 5 trees versus, 50 trees.
Totally.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in that case, I think February is fine for us.
February's good.
If we get
Okay.
requests in the meantime, we'll say that we're meeting with the UFC to talk about how to handle any requests that come in. We'll kind of put them on hold.
I know that's not ideal for you, but is that okay?
Okay.
So,
We didn't expect y'all to have a clean answer. This is
complex. We have a few commissioners not here, and it's a pretty big topic, so it would be nice, hopefully they can be here for the next discussion.
Well, thank you. Very good discussion. Let's move on to the economic opportunities analysis. Agenda item.
I'm not Tom.
Okay.
Tom is online here. I'm Jeff Cottle. I manage the river environmental team at the Beaver Plant Sustainability. So the environmental portion of this discussion, I will present here for you.
Hi, Jeff. Jeff is also often our initial, at least tree-related code contact in BPS.
Long time.
Tom,
All right.
would you like to introduce yourself and the topic?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Armstrong. I'm a supervising planner here at BPS, and I lead our housing and economic policy team and have been the lead on the economic opportunities analysis part of this sort of 2 projects running concurrently. And so I'm going to share my screen. We have a presentation to support our discussion today.
I will, while Tom is doing that, jump in and say Brian Lando, who is here virtually, is Urban Forestry's lead on this particular project, working closely with BPS. Mr. Brian. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so just for your information, so as Jeff indicated, we're doing two major things, major projects right now. One is to update the economic opportunities analysis. That is the long-range employment forecast for the city, and with that comes an update to our buildable lands inventory, and to look at our land supply and how that matches the forecast, and it provides the basis for making policy and zoning decisions, including the tree code. And at the same time, Jeff's team has been working on an update to the natural resource inventories, primarily along the Columbia Slough, and it's called the Columbia Corridor Industrial Lands Environmental Overlay Zone Project, CCIL for short. And so we'll tell you a little bit about those and how they work together for the type of decision that we're currently in front of the Planning Commission with. So again, I'll give you an overview of the EOA. Jeff will go into some of the natural resource protection policy options that are embedded within the EOA, and we'll talk a little bit about next steps. Again, just last week, we published the proposed drafts for both of these projects, and we're now out for public comment. We have a Planning Commission public hearing scheduled for January 13th. And then after that, the Planning Commission will deliberate in January, February, into March before they vote on a recommendation to City Council. And then we expect sometime late spring during the summer that City Council will start their process to adopt these projects. So with the EOA, the EOA is what we call a supporting document to the comprehensive plan. And it is adopted by ordinance as part of the comprehensive plan. As I said, it includes both an employment forecast and a buildable lands inventory. And what we're really doing is looking at that employment projection, looking at what we expect our land capacity to be, and analyzing, do we have a surplus of capacity or a deficit of capacity to meet those future land needs. And we do this, the primary reason that we're doing this is statewide planning goal 9 is the statewide economic development goal. And that is basically a requirement that cities demonstrate that they have a 20-year land supply to accommodate expected employment growth. And again, beyond that, it is part of the comprehensive plan, and it is a guide for future policy decisions. What that goal 9 requirement means is that anytime we make a decision that reduces employment capacity, such as expanding environmental overlay zones, we need to show that after we make that change, we still have enough in land capacity to meet expected future employment growth. And so that's what this EOA analysis is designed to do. So in the proposed draft of the EOA, we go through a process. We are forecasting 90,000 new jobs by 2045. We go through a process to allocate those jobs to different parts of the city, different geographies, we call them, that have different building types, different land needs, different mixes of jobs. Think of the central city being primarily office jobs, retail jobs, hospitality, neighborhood commercial, again, retail and service jobs, a little bit of other stuff, especially healthcare, the smaller health clinics, the industrial areas, primarily manufacturing and warehouse jobs, but they include back office jobs, corporate headquarters, some retail jobs, some education jobs. Our campus institutions are our hospitals and colleges. And then our residential areas, we actually have quite a few jobs. Think of schools or churches, daycares, adult residential homes. There's actually quite a bit of employment going on in our residential areas, and we expect that to continue to grow. So we go through a process to take that job forecast, convert it into a land demand based on, building coverage and square feet of building per employee. That gives us the land demand, and then we compare that to our supply. And what you see here on the right-hand side of this table is in areas like the central city or our neighborhood commercial districts, where we see a lot of redevelopment, a lot of density going up, we have a lot of capacity. And it is really our industrial areas where we don't see a lot of vertical development is where we have the tightest land supply. As part of this EOA, we've put forward a number of different what we call policy proposals. These are decisions that we know are either pending, like the CCILE zones, or projects that we're already working on or have been waiting to work on. And we'll talk a little bit about how to apply the tree code in the heavy industrial zone, which has been waiting for this update of the EOA. Emerging issues have been around community livability and that industrial residential edge, and how residential areas are impacted by industrial development. And we foresee a future project to add additional screening buffer requirements on industrial development within 500 feet of residential zones. So we're trying to account for that future decision. At the same time, we also see a number of what we call investment strategies that can help expand that industrial capacity, because we have a lot of sites within our existing industrial areas that are brownfields and are expensive to develop, or have infrastructure deficiency, a lack of adequate sewer or water service, that with a little bit of investment, it will reduce some of the barriers to development. And so we account for that expanded capacity as well. Again, this is sort of zooming into our industrial areas, and we break that out into 4 different categories, depending on the different parts of the city, and really look at each of these areas has a little bit of a different characteristic. So if you think about Airport Way and the industrial corridor, Columbia Corridor east of the airport, out along Airport Way, that has a different feel than, say, Rivergate or the Portland Harbor. And so we look at the different demand and types of businesses there, as well as what land is available, and try and again reconcile the demand and supply in each of those areas. I'm going to turn things over to Jeff to talk a little bit more about the natural resource protection options.
Yeah, so we'll really focus in on that middle column here. So as Tom said, there are really three considerations for natural resource protection. Again, it's sort of EOA takes into consideration the land demands of these three different components: the Columbia Corridor Industrial Lands Project, a future Willamette River North Reach project, which we're just about to really go out to the public. There currently is some information out for property owners who talk about it, and then also that consideration on the heavy industrial zone for the tree code and changes to that exemption. Go ahead, Tom. So the Columbia Corridor Industrial Lands E-Zone project, it's really, Tom said around the Columbia Slough, but really think of it for the areas that so there's West Hayden Island, that's actually in Multnomah County, as you can see there. But basically it's everything from the slough. The largest portion of this is the mostly industrial land that's between the Columbia Slough and the Columbia River. And so that also does include the east portion of Hayden Island. There are some miscellaneous lands, some that were specifically included kind of between the Willamette River and the corridor that were just not already identified in sort of our natural resource sites. So we're making sure there are resources there. We want to make sure that we're protecting those. And then there was freeway lands down in Johnson Creek that had been pulled out specifically from a previous project that addressed environmental zones throughout the rest of the city because it is an industrial zone and it's in the IH zone, the heavy industrial. And then just a little bit of land that's basically at the where the Forest Park and the Willamette River regulations come together. So there's a little strip there. So basically the majority of it is focused on the Columbia Corridor and those industrial lands there, although there's a mix of different types of development. Next slide, Tom. So just quickly, in terms of the environmental zone, there are two zones. There's the protection zone, which is basically an area that's a no-build zone. You have to demonstrate in that area that there is a public benefit that results from development in that area. So essentially, for basically all private development, other than utilities and like that, it can't be built. The conservation zone is a zone that's much more permissible. The development is allowed. You have to minimize your impact, reduce the impact, and where you cannot do those two things, you have to mitigate. But it is developable, and just so as long as mitigation is a part of it. So next slide, Tom. So this is just a slide to say really the fundamental two questions when you apply the environmental zone is, number one, do you apply the conservation zone or the protection zone? So we identify natural resources. We say, okay, which one are we going to do? Generally, the protection zone goes on the resource at minimum. And then the second question is, what is the buffer really for both for the conservation zone, but especially for the protection zone? What are we going to put outside of the resource itself? How much of a buffer are we going to put there? And so those are the two fundamental questions that we're asking for the Columbia Corridor Industrial Lands Project. Next slide. So we had in the discussion draft, the previous draft, which is a draft that goes to people, but then we receive comments directly to planning and sustainability, and we take those comments and then we make changes as we see fit. We had three different options: low, medium, and high protection scenarios. We didn't actually say we did not have a recommended scenario at that time. It was really open to discussion amongst folks. We often come with a recommendation, but in this case, because of the different considerations and the connection to the EOA, we had these three different options to hear back from people in terms of what they thought we should do. The recommendation in the proposed draft is essentially to apply the protection zone to all the resources, so streams, sloughs, wetlands, and specifically wetlands within 50 feet of other waterways, and a 50-foot buffer around of protection zone, again, the no-build zone around those resources. And then for the conservation zone, we have a natural resource inventory where we rank the different resources, and specifically, especially riparian resources are of the most important. So around these streams, sloughs, wetlands, rivers, etc. And so beyond that 50-foot buffer, we're applying the conservation zone to anything that we rank as high or medium. And then
The wetlands beyond 50 feet will not have a protection zone, but will have a conservation zone applied to it. Still difficult to develop, but you can if you have no other option. And this is really looking at isolated wetlands that are outside of the nearest areas to the waterways to say, again, you would always have to do the assessment of where can I build and can I stay out of the wetland. There's also state requirements and federal requirements for wetlands as well that apply, although maybe less federal now with changes at the federal government. But anyhow, so the conservation zone applied to those outside of that 50 feet from waterways. And then we're also implementing floodplain regulations for those who may have been following, who've been around for a little while. We have been in a process of updating our regulations across the city in response to what is the FEMA, it's a National Flood Insurance Program biological opinion. So basically it's threatened and endangered salmon and species, salmon and steelhead species. So most specifically, we've already updated some of the requirements in the environmental zone, but most specifically, we're adding additional requirements within 170 feet of ordinary high water. Specifically, that those directives are specifically identified in the biological opinion as an area that is more important for these species. And so you need to go beyond just our standard no net loss where you impact and you mitigate to get to where you keep where the current condition. You have to actually do something additional in that area if you're going to propose development in that area.
That's only next to the Columbia River and the slough?
Well, we have it elsewhere in the city, but for this project, that's the only area that it is. Okay. And it's, the lower slough, because that's the only area that's actually accessible to salmon and steelhead.
Okay, I was gonna say, because none of those places are where salmon and steelhead would be.
Right, so the middle and upper slough, we are not applying them, and largely, and behind the levees, we do not apply these requirements because again, through the biological, there's no expectation that these species would get into those areas. Okay. Other than, I guess, very large events, flood events, but we are not required to regulate there. Gotcha. Next slide, Tom. So this just generally tells you what the change is to the left there. That bar to the left shows existing E-zones. So about 4,100 acres of E-zones currently. So it covers, so you can see there on the right, there's a total of 15,000 acres within tax lots. So both public and private tax lots. We're not talking about outside tax lots like right away, and the water itself is sometimes in the E zone, et cetera. But so we're essentially going from what is about 27% of that area covered with environmental zones to about 31%, 31.6. So roughly 4% increase. But the big change is you can see, I mean, that's 4%. That's significant. You can see there, it's about 600 acres. But the big change is the blue is the conservation overlay zone and the green is the protection overlay zone. So you can see a significant improvement, expansion of the protection zone. So it's actually a smaller area covered by the conservation overlay zone, but about 50% more protection zone. And largely, a lot of that is because when the regulations that apply now were applied in like the late 80s and 90s and often didn't actually apply the protection overlay zone. They applied the conservation zone. So we now have better mapping of resources, and also we are shifting where existing is in a lot of the conservation zone to the protection zone. And that's even just specifically on the resource itself and not so much the buffer, but there is obviously some of that buffer is included. Next slide, Tom. So of course, because as Tom said, there's the limit, we have a kind of a tight industrial land supply. Our focus, one major focus is on the industrial zones and what the implications are. So there's, as you can see, there's about 15,000 acres of tax lots that are in industrial zones.
No, Jeff, that's.
Oh, no, that's total in the CCI.
That's total.
Yeah, sorry. And then, so the 7,500 is the industrial and employment lands in the CCIL. And then the buildable land inventory. So we have about 1,700 acres, 1,750 that are in the actual buildable land inventory. And that means, again, as Tom said, that means that we, because of the conditions, either they're vacant or they are, the current development would support redevelopment. That's how we look at it, basically vacant or underutilized, is what we call it. We get a certain number, and that includes constraints, again, infrastructure constraints, et cetera. We look at it in all of those together and say, which of these things are most constrained? And we remove those, and what is left is at 1,750 acres in the industrial zone. So next slide, Tom. So again, a similar bar chart here to show you the shift in the E zones as well for the industrial sites. So again, going from around 1,100 total acres in environmental zone to 1,475 there to the right. Again, it's very similar. A shift from the conservation zone to the protection zone, the higher level of protection. One note that's here, as you'll see, is that, you know, we have looked at, again, because there is that shift where we had in the past applied the conservation zone and not the protection zone to the resources themselves. A lot of it, 45% of that P zone is actually water body. So, you know, it's not actually going to change the developability because they're not, or steep slopes, so they're not developable anyways right now. So that other 55% of the protection zone is really where the buffers and the other additional protections that we have applied are there. Next slide, Tom. So that is, and as Tom said, so that one is going along, the Columbia Corridor project is going along with the EOA and will be adopted at the same time. We are following the same process together. We are currently about to go to Planning Commission together. And those changes will be adopted. Whatever comes out of that Columbia Corridor Industrial Lands project will be adopted at the same time that the economic opportunities analysis is adopted. The other two considerations, the Willamette River North Reach project, we have placed some basic concepts of what we expect to apply there. Although we will go through a full process, a planning process for the North Reach. And one thing to note for the North Reach is, and this shows you how important the connection to the economic opportunities analysis is, we adopted a plan for the North Reach in 2010. It was appealed and eventually never went into effect because the determination was that economic opportunities analysis was out of date. And so that's why we were doing these all together. And that's why in the past, again, if you have been involved in these types of things, why we have held off on for these different environmental protections because of that, the very tight industrial capacity and making sure that through the connections with the EOA are accounted for. So again, as Tom said, as the future projects move forward, they will have accounted for these changes. And so we will not be subject to any litigation on that. I'm sure there still will be litigation, but nonetheless, we will have demonstrated the capacity for these projects. So basically for the Willamette River North Reach, it's a pretty simple, one of the things is it's pretty simple. We are shifting from the current approach, which is very much just sort of general and discretionary in terms of its regulations, to the application of the river overlay zone, which is applied in the Central and South Reach. And it has an actual river environmental zone similar to the conservation zone. But the main questions of the differences in terms of our policy options here are more specifically, we expect to apply a 50-foot setback. So development can't be put within 50 feet of the Willamette River for non-industrial lands. So that's an assumption that we already have. But for industrial land along the North Reach, and as you probably know, there's a lot of industrial land in the North Reach. We are considering either maintaining it to 25-foot setback, which exists now, or expanding that to 50 feet. In the North Reach, we have an emphasis on marine industrial, so industrial that needs to be on the river and needs to be connected to the river. That setback does not apply to those things that need to be on the river. So in theory, we continue to emphasize and prioritize marine industrial. They can do what they need to do in that 50 feet. They would just need to push everything else beyond that 50 feet. So any offices, bathrooms, et cetera, parking, all of that would need to be outside that 50 feet, but things that need to be by the river could still be by the river if they're assuming they're doing marine industrial. Similar to the Columbia Corridor project, we would apply the floodplain requirements here in the North Reach. It's the last part of that. Those floodplain requirements already apply in the Central and South Reach through other projects. Go ahead, Tom. So quickly, just tree code in the heavy industrial, as you probably are aware, the last zone that is still exempt from the tree code, both planting and preservation, is the heavy industrial zone. So we're really looking at those two as options and what might apply in the heavy industrial. Go ahead, Tom. So as you know, I mean, you're familiar with this, should be, you know, smaller trees, less requirements, the larger you get, 20 and over, $450 per inch. So we are looking at both the planting and specifically preservation here and different options for that. Go ahead, Tom. So there's basically, again, we've been looking at approaching everything with these different scenarios, so low, medium, and high, where low is would just be planting requirements, so the 10% for the industrial lands that are applied to other employment lands. Medium would be, I mean, I guess I would say, so all three of these have planting requirements, right? And that's the baseline starting point. It's more about the tree preservation. So low, medium would be still requiring preservation, but at the middle, determining the $1,800 per tree as compared to using the per inch that's in that applies to everywhere else throughout the city. It starts at for 20 inch trees, and the high is just applying it completely. So including that above 20 inch, $450 per inch fee. So the medium is slightly reduced just in terms of cost, but still at that $1,800, which is significantly less, obviously, than the high. Next up. So just as a reminder, and this is a little bit hard to see here in the room, especially with lighting, but so the IH, the requirements for the IH zones and the tree canopy requirements only apply outside of the E zones, other than when E zones, the environmental zones, when things are exempt from the environmental zone. So really what we're talking about, all that other stuff, the Columbia Corridor and what will be the river environmental will address a lot of that, this area, and what the tree zone, the tree code applies to everything outside of that, would apply to everything outside of the environmental zones. Next slide, Tom. And that's what this shows. Basically, we've looked at how does that break down in terms of what is in the E zones or in the greenway, right? Which will be part of the river overlay zone and the river environmental, but right now it's in the greenway overlay zone. And what you see here, if you look at that all IH lots, essentially half of the canopy in the area, so 146, it's actually somehow literally half, is in E zones, and half would be subject to the tree code requirements. So that's what we're talking about, so 146 net acres that are in the IH zone. As you can see there in the buildable lands inventory, that counts, that's 22 acres that would be subject to the tree code. Next slide. This is just briefly kind of a breakdown, and you can take a look at this, which will provide the presentation, but this just has the different considerations, what is current, what we are doing with the EOA, and what are we more specifically looking at in terms of considerations in the EOA, but are part of future projects. So the tree code project, which as I understand it, starting to get going in terms of the actual updates to the tree code, would look at the IH zone and potentially make changes consistent with whatever comes out of this project in terms of just direction and accounting for those implications. As you can see, the investment strategies that Tom talked about, brownfields, infrastructure, et cetera, will be, and there's going to be an assumption about that, and the city council will need to make a decision about what is the expectation for those investments. So that's all part of the EOA. The Columbia Corridor project will go into effect and be adopted at the same time as the EOA, but then those other two, so the tree code and the North Reach, will be placeholders and then implemented through other processes. The key part of this is that the EOA has determined there's enough capacity to account for all of that. So that's the biggest conclusion, whereas, and largely because we actually, and you can look at it as a good or a bad thing, but we have less job growth expected over the next 20 years than we have in the past. And so those lower, and we didn't get into the details of that, but those lower job growth estimates have actually allowed for, we don't need as much land, and that has allowed us to demonstrate that with all of these changes, even the things that we're not doing right now, put those placeholders in, that we have enough capacity to account for that while still meeting that land demand for industrial land. Next slide, Tom. And this is the last slide. So just again, Tom had a similar slide, but just so you know, we're taking testimony right now on the proposed draft because it was released, whatever, I guess now about a week or so ago, last week. As we often do, as we always do, we're taking testimony through the map app for both projects. That's goes directly to the planning commission, and they will consider that testimony and tell us what to do from here. As we said, as Tom said, hearing on the 13th, and then we will continue working through things with the planning commission through work sessions and hopefully to get a recommendation within the next few months. And then we'll go to city council later in the year. That's it.
So just a quick clarification. So we have 10 minutes in, and thank you very much. They're excellent. So just so basically you've submitted this. You will go to city council with those options that are on there, and you're getting public input with part of the public input process, and they will determine which of those options, or are you going in with a specific recommendation of an option?
Well, we have a specific recommendation for the Columbia Corridor project.
Right.
And Tom, you can talk more specifically about what is in, how the EOA accounts for the north.
Yeah. So, when we initially started this project, the EOA update, we expected a much tighter industrial land supply than where we wound up. And so we expected for the North Reach or for the tree code in the heavy industrial zone to need to make harder decisions, get more guidance as to which direction to go from out of council. But because we have a little bit more of a surplus of industrial land, a little bit more of a buffer, we don't need that sort of hard decision guidance right now. What we're saying is there is enough capacity to accommodate that future decision. Let those individual planning processes run their course and figure out what the best thing is to do. But the EOA is no longer a barrier to making those decisions and doing those planning projects.
So what is the kind of input that's most helpful today for you? Yeah.
I was going to say, to your point, we will council on the Columbia Corridor Industrial Lands project will tell us what protections we should apply. So the North Reach and the tree code we're kind of taking those off the table generally, although still we want to provide that input to the council. But definitely the Columbia Corridor Industrial Lands project, the amount of buffer and application of E-zones, those will be that will be adopted and that will go into effect. So the city council will make the final determination of that as a part of this process.
The industrial job growth that's in your report is projecting the highest amount in logistics, Amazon, trucking. That's going to bring a lot of trucks with diesel fuel along Columbia Boulevard. That affects the low income, low canopy neighborhoods that are just to the south of that, going from North Portland all the way to Cully and Summerlin, or I forget the name of that neighborhood. So I would like to see as much tree protection and planting as possible to try to capture those many pollutants that the state in their wisdom does not seem to want to regulate, diesel fuels. So whatever can be done. And I think right now there's no distinction between what kind of industrial development happens. It's a lot of trucks there. If you haven't been on Columbia Boulevard, my God, the size of these Amazon, FedEx, I don't think UPS is there yet. The post office is going there. It's huge. It's just a lot of big trucks that are coming there. So we need the trees.
Other commissioners?
I have some thoughts I can bring up. A lot of this has very little to do with street trees, correct? This is all on private property.
That's correct.
So the
It has
street,
nothing to do with street.
Okay, great.
street trees, yeah.
and City Forester Cairo, is it correct that still street trees, all of the requirements during development apply just the same to an industrial area nonetheless in the right of way?
Yes, Brian's nodding as well. 3 people, yes, that is correct.
Excellent, thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
That's really good, and I wanna ask the question to make sure that, I don't know if you guys have the answer, but do you know of any industrial development that has been stopped because of tree protection on site, even a single time?
That would be.
Not that I'm aware of, and I think, you know, what we've seen happen, right? The change was made in 2021 to apply the tree code to the general industrial zones, the IG zones.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we've seen in recent development is them able to accommodate, you know, around the edges, especially the planting requirements, but also much of what Jeff showed, right, in this Columbia corridor area, you have those slough areas that count towards the planting canopy requirement. And so, you know, I don't think that we have necessarily heard from industrial property owners or developers that in the general industrial zone that it has been a big issue. I think the heavy industrial zone, especially along the Portland Harbor, is a little bit different, um, especially when you think about those larger sites, the port terminals, some of the other private terminals. They have really wide areas for, you know, lay down areas for big bulky material. They're heavily, intensively used, not necessarily with buildings, but it is active employment areas. But again, sort of if those tree requirements get pushed to the edges, um, you know, I think there is a pathway to accommodate that.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. In that no one has ever, in any development I've ever been a part of, which is substantial, had to plant a particular tree in a particular place. So even in industrial forestry, they can keep any tree they choose. So usually keeping 1 tree per acre means you have 40 trees off in a corner, and that counts because it doesn't have to be on each individual acre. So I guess what I'm ultimately getting at is I think that even in the industrial areas, the heavy, even if it is the airport where there's a plane landing, the requirements for street trees, or not street trees, for private property on-site trees should be fully enforced because all they're going to do ultimately is pay the mitigation fee to not do the planting that's required. Then that keeps the rest of the city more heavily treated because now we can take that money and apply it to mitigate what they couldn't do. And I am really going to hit hard that no single development has ever happened or been stopped in this city because of the tree code. They just paid to get rid of the trees. It's one of the biggest issues, certainly in development in or in residential or downtown areas like this. So I want to pretty forcefully say that we should apply every code because I don't believe that these gigantic buildings are in any way getting hampered by a small fee that for them is a rounding error in their annual reports. But for everyone else, it is a job in the city planting a tree. It is dozens of trees getting planted to the point where now we are working with, like what Commissioner Nelson is talking about, getting these trees planted. So even if they are not physically planting a tree, they might be able to find a spot around the edge. They might be able to find a spot in their parking lot, et cetera, et cetera. But if we are capturing the money in order to plant trees elsewhere, then we're still at this kind of no net loss kind of thing. But a general just, they don't have to do anything or reducing the cost seems silly to have the full cost for mitigation in a residential area, but in a company that is worth billions of dollars, their costs are reduced. That seems pretty inequitable in my opinion.
Yeah, I think this group has talked about the industrial zones quite a number of times, and just putting in a plug for it is a big public health opportunity to have canopy in those areas. And for reasons that Commissioner Nelson brought up, it's an issue of equity that will be increasing. And it's not only for the surrounding neighborhood and the city as a whole, with climate change protection, but also for the employees that are there in terms of quality of life and their encouragement of exercise and all those wonderful kinds of things. So, given all that, the benefit seems to be in large excess of the risk of potential reduced development. And I think you've made that case. And why should these properties have like a lower standard? The thing that hit me about what you presented, and I might have been confused about the numbers, but when I go camping in a federal forest, I have to be 100 feet, from a stream.
Yeah.
And so, why does a big company get a cut on that, get some diminished? So it was a little confusing, your, protection and environmental zone, if it was 50 plus 50 that was happening there, or, we don't need to get into those details, but, you get the drift on that.
Yeah, and in some cases that is true. I mean,
Yeah.
beyond the 50, it does depend on whether if there are resources there that
Yeah.
are contiguous, then
Right.
it would continue. And that's that high and medium, that's how we define them, it's really proximity to the waterway. So
Yeah.
if they, in your example, if it was continued to be forested and it had been within that 50 feet and continued on, it would apply environmental zone. Good comment.
Okay, well, we're out of time, but Commissioner Vandermark, like a 1 minute comment?
Yeah, I mean, I want to agree with short time with what everyone has said, and I would recommend that we make the strongest recommendations. And I've said this before. I live in North Portland. I live maybe 4 blocks south of Columbia Boulevard, right? And so I think about this a lot. I hear the industry and one thing I always think about is we parcel out land use, understandably, but at the same time, these businesses are literally my neighbor. They're my neighbor. And I think to Casey's point, I want to make certain that we're treating them like I try to be a good neighbor, and I want them to be a good neighbor to the residents in our neighborhood. And what we haven't talked a lot about is urban heat island, right? And all the research is there about urban heat island, let alone pollution, let alone, Bruce's great points about traffic. So I kind of think we all need to do our part. And, my neighborhood and, kind of the areas that we're talking about are an adjacency to a lot of the lowest income neighbors in our city. So how do we all be good neighbors, and how do we all contribute to literally the urban forest and public health outcomes that we want?
Okay, final quick comment, Commissioner Sanchez.
I agree that we need to definitely be more or less strict on ensuring that industrial areas are not going to be getting a free ride on getting through with limited restrictions on the urban forest. I think that there should be some sort of incentive situation that promotes, maintaining forests and also coming up with ways of design and future construction that allows for tree retention and for new trees to be done. Similar to Casey, I've also been on substantial amount of projects associated with industrial and just general construction. And there almost always is a way to ensure that trees can be saved on a site and planted on site during early design. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation, very educational.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of what you want to do, if you wanted to submit, to planning commission and say, in a letter that just says, this is what we think, and especially if you want to focus on the tree code, what you recommend for that. Again, also just in terms of the conversation, the baseline is the planting would be required. So 10% is the planting. It's really about the question of preservation in terms of the different options.
Mm-hmm.
Can also emphasize that you believe the planting should happen as well, but so I think both potentially at planning commission and also once it is to city council to just reiterate what direction you think. Again, obviously you will have oversight of the tree code when the update process, and you'll be informed about how that goes moves forward. But having, I think, those types of
give predicate testimony to those.
And on
What
that, thank you.
time, what's the time frame if the commission wanted to have such a letter to use?
You need to submit it, well, we're actually going to, see, Tom, it's gonna be open through the 16th, but through that 13th, the January 13th date hearing. So
Very
the time that
soon.
you submit.
That's very soon, that's before your next meeting.
Mhm.
Yeah, is there any way that can get extended?
I think currently, Tom, it's expected to just go through the 16th. When do you meet again?
15th.
Do we have a quorum still?
Yeah, we don't have any plans as of yet to extend it beyond that, but there'll be additional opportunities at council. There may be a reopening of it, depending on the type of testimony we get at the January 13th hearing. We may need more time.
Confusing to see, I have with
You do have quorum if chairs, if you wanted to vote for somebody to work with
Does
staff.
somebody want to write a letter about this, or someone willing to volunteer? And then we could just authorize that person and we could just revise it by email.
Willing to write it.
Okay. Great.
And then I send it to you and Leah, what's the process?
Yeah, I mean, I probably at least include, Brian has helped us a lot with these kind of things.
And Priscilla.
And Priscilla, yeah. And then to the whole group, I'd say as a whole, but if you want to start with us, that's fine. Yeah.
Could,
Okay. So
could you
is
provide
there-
the PowerPoint?
Great.
Yep.
Is there anybody who objects, with short of a formal vote, anyone who objects to that process? Any of the commissioners?
We have a quorum.
I think we do.
We don't know.
Okay.
We have
No, we do.
7
We
people.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. I vote, I move that we allow Bruce, Commissioner Nelson to write that.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Looks unanimous. Oh, we don't have Commissioner McMillan.
Or perhaps Commissioner
Yeah, no, she
McMillan's
may be
voting differently.
muted, but. Okay, are you there, Commissioner McMillan?
3, 4, 5, 6. We still have 6.
I am here. Just
Are
have
you
to
in-
work.
Are you in favor or against or
I
abstain?
absolutely am, yes.
Okay, perfect. All right,
Unanimous.
thank you.
I gotta jet, sorry.
Meeting.
No worries.
There's a comment, keep going, meeting adjourned, but the
Okay.
street trees comment from Corinne. With street tree maintenance, a lot of that would be eliminated because of pruning. A lot of those trees are not planted with permits, and we still have a right-of-way design issue, as you all know, across the city to have ample space for trees and traffic.
So some of those concerns might be based on things that wouldn't apply in this case.
Great summary. Some of those concerns are based on things that don't apply.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I want to say, I saw